For our A2 media documentary, we created a documentary which is based on homework and the amount of stress and whether that stress is actually necessary for students to attain good grades in exams or not. We also produced a radio advertisement for our documentary which would appear on Heart FM to make people listen to it. Our primary audience would probably be parents and students because it's quite a broad topic. Links while to our ancillary products.
Yeah, the radio advert has lots of links to the documentary as well, so gives the viewers more insight to what they can expect.
The first piece of feedback that we received from the randomly selected people's questions was that the radio advert linked very well to the documentary. I think this was one of the main things that we wanted to convey for our three products, is that we wanted the radio advert, the documentary and the double page spread all to link. We wanted to create a brand image between the three. We did this between the radio advert and the documentary by using the same narrator, using the same music, using the vox pops from the documentary on the radio advert, the same experts on the documentary from the radio advert, and we thought this was very important. I feel that a brand image is important to convey throughout because firstly it will allow the audience to recognise the documentary from the radio advert because they're very interlinked, and also I think it's very important because it produces consistency and therefore allows it to become more professional, which is one of our main targets at the start. So I feel this piece of feedback was very, very good for us, and it proved everything that we wanted to prove by the end of it. It was a good piece of feedback that allowed us to understand that we had fulfilled our target from the start in this subject.
What was your favourite part about the documentary and why?
Probably the interview with Paul Ashdown. Probably give you don't really see him around much, so he gives a more expert and kind of view.
Our second piece of feedback was that they felt that the expert interview was the most interesting part of the documentary. Firstly, I'd like to say that this is a positive piece of feedback, firstly, because I feel that the expert interview was the main thing that we advertised on all of our products. It was on the radio advert as a main piece of footage on the radio advert. It was used on the DPS as a grab quote, and the photo was used on that. So it was one of the main reasons we wanted to gain the audiences. We thought it was a very interesting part of the documentary. It was from an authoritative figure, and we felt that that was what a lot of people would be interested in, and therefore the fact that someone's come back and said that it's the most interesting part of the documentary means that it would have been a successful part of the documentary. However, it does raise the question of whether we produced a balanced argument. Overall, at the start of our creation of the documentary, we wanted to produce a balanced argument between whether homework is too much stress or whether homework is needed within school and college. And it begs the question whether we did. If they've found the expert interview more interesting than the vox pops, and that may mean that it's more biased towards the expert's opinion, and therefore that homework is needed. Overall, I would look back on that and maybe say that we could have had more opinions from people who believe that homework was too stressful, and that we should have had experts for people who felt that it was too much stress, and that we didn't produce such a balanced argument. I feel also that the expert interview was a main focus within the documentary, as it was one of our main sources of creating binary oppositions theory. He was almost seen as the evil person within the documentary due to the binary oppositions theory. He would have been the evil aspect of that, and then we would have had the almost the hero within the Vox Pop, saying that homework was stressful, it creates that oppositions, and that's why he was such an important figure within the documentary. And the fact that the Vox Pops, which we felt were as important as the expert, isn't getting raised as being interesting or isn't getting raised as being important within the documentary, maybe states that we didn't balance the argument as well as we thought we had.
Which was your least favourite product and why?
I'd probably go for the documentary because it didn't have lots of music in it, to be honest.
What was your favourite product and why?
Probably the documentary because it had a lot of information in.
The next piece of feedback that we received was very questionable because on one hand one person said the documentary was their favourite product, and on the other hand another person said the documentary was their least favourite product. I feel this is almost a failure within our production, as we were ultimately advertising for people to watch our documentary, and therefore we felt that that must and should have been the most interesting aspect of all the products, because that is ultimately what we're advertising. The person who said that the documentary was their least favourite product said it was due to a lack of music. We felt that this was an awkward response. I felt this was a response that that didn't really affect the documentary overall, and I felt that this wasn't a factor that would have played much of a part on whether they liked or disliked the documentary. We felt that we wanted to create a documentary that was professional due to the subject that we are trying to overcome and trying to portray within our documentary about a very serious matter. We didn't want too much music because of that fact. We wanted it to come across as professional. We wanted to get as much stats and statistics across. However, looking back at it now, it could have meant that the documentary became dull. We were trying to make it professional, however it could have become boring and dull, and therefore interest may have been lost due to the fact that there wasn't enough music, and there wasn't enough archival footage for them to keep interested, and therefore the reason why it was his least favourite product was actually because he was bored, and that ultimately would have meant that more music maybe would not have meant that he got us bored, and therefore would have improved his experience and improved our documentary. And in response to that feedback, maybe more music would have improved our documentary overall, and we could have tried to put our music within the documentary in a professional way, so that there we would have maintained his interest and reduced his boredom, but also maintained the professionalism within the documentary.
What was interesting about the documentary?
I think that it had quite a lot of interesting statistics, and I liked the insert of the archival footage of the Pokemon at all.
Another piece of feedback that we received from this particular piece of feedback that we decided to choose was that this person felt that their favourite part of the documentary was the stats, firstly. And this basically tells us that we chose the correct way to present our documentary. We felt that having a presenter wouldn't allow us to provide the stats and statistics in as much vastness as we did. We wanted to create as much time as we could to have those stats and statistics put across. And also, they said that their favourite part of the documentary was the archival footage, the other footage. And this again shows that having a narrator allowed us to get these two pieces of key footage in. The stats, which came up as text on the screen, and the archival footage, which was used, would have been allowed to have used as much if we had a presenter, as we would have to have time for the presenter to be on screen. And therefore shows that, again, our choice was maybe correct by using the narrator. However, I do feel that with this piece of feedback there is negatives also. The fact that he doesn't talk about the expert interview and the Vox Pops, which were the main two things that we wanted to portray in our advertisement for this documentary, and were the main two things that we wanted to have clashing within the documentary. We wanted to create binary opposition between Paul Ashdown and the Vox Pops, and we felt that this was going to be the main two protagonists within the documentary in order to create an opinion and to create almost a conflict between people in order for them to create an opinion. And the fact that they didn't mention that the Vox Pops or the expert interview was a main part of their experience shows that maybe we didn't do our job well, and maybe we didn't make the expert interview in the Vox Pops as dramatic or as important as they should have been, and therefore maybe we failed with that. However, overall we do know that through the Stuart Hall theory that it's all down to interpretation. Depending on people's backgrounds and their views and their opinions, everyone will decode the information that we're giving in different ways, and therefore different people will find different things more interesting than other things.
Was the theme of education conveyed well, and if so, how successful was this?
Yeah, because like you did the school bell on the radio advert, and like you did it in like a college environment as well.
The fact that pretty much every shot within the documentary was within a college or of the college allowed us to do that, and meant that people gained a rough idea of what the documentary was about immediately, and therefore they knew whether they were interested in the documentary immediately or whether they weren't interested in the documentary immediately. It shows the education within the mise-en-scène. An example of this is that we shot Paul Ashdown as one of the experts within an office. The office shows authority, shows that he's an expert, and on the contrary, you see the Vox Pops of the students within almost the lunch hall, and therefore shows that they're not as authoritative and that they are Vox Pops, and that is shown straight away within and through mise-en-scène. The mise-en-scène of the office, you have the desk, you have the books behind, you have the clock, and the mise-en-scène of the lunch hall, you have the chairs, you have students walking about, they're standing up in the middle of the lunch hall, and therefore it shows that straight away who's who. It shows two opposites, and again supports the idea of the binary oppositions theory.
Do you think our double-page spread looks professional?
Yeah, the background with the whole school and it's professional, and the way it's all laid out with all the text and the masthead.
The third piece of feedback that we received stated that the DPS looks professional due to the background. This was a positive piece of feedback due to professionalism being one of our main targets. We wanted to create a professional feel throughout all of our pieces of product, and that was portrayed within this piece of feedback and was praised within this piece of feedback. Due to it being such a serious topic, we felt that having a very, very serious and professional feel to the double page spread was very important, and this piece of feedback has stated that we did it very well, and therefore we've achieved our goal.
Do you think narration worked well instead of a presenter? If not, why?
Yeah, because it meant that you could have like different clips put on top of the voiceover rather than having to make time for the presenter to be there.
The next piece of feedback that we received was that the person preferred narration, which is what we involved within our documentary, to having a presenter on screen. And this meant that they felt that more footage could have been showed due to us having narration, and therefore they found it more interesting. We know that the subject that we were creating a documentary on could have been seen as relatively boring or uninteresting for certain people, and therefore we felt that we had to create the most interesting piece of documentary that we could have in order to maintain certain people's interest, and certain people who are maybe on the fence about